In chapter 20, we're going to be talking about oxidation reduction. And in this first section, we're going to discuss the meaning of oxidation and reduction. So traditionally, oxidation meant oxygen was added in a chemical reaction, and reduction meant that oxygen was removed in a chemical reaction. Now, that didn't perfectly describe every scenario. So the current definition of redox says that electrons are transferred between reactants. So it's now defined in the terms of electrons rather than in the terms of oxygen, although oxygen may be involved and it may not. So in this example here, magnesium atom reacts with a sulfur atom to make magnesium sulfide. So this is an example of an oxidation reduction reaction. So I'm going to rewrite it here, showing that the product, magnesium sulfide, is actually a magnesium ion and a sulfide ion, just for simplicity's sake. So in this case, the magnesium atom transitioned to a magnesium ion. It was oxidized when it did this. So one reactant is always oxidized in any redox reaction. The other reactant is reduced. So in this case, the sulfur atom was reduced to become a sulfur ion in this equation. So how do you know which elements are oxidized and which are reduced? This is something that you're going to be tested on. And there's a little saying, a little phrase to help you remember this. This is what it is. Leo says grr. So think of Leo the lion growling and saying grr. So Leo is going to stand for lose electrons oxidation. So if an atom loses an electrons, it becomes oxidized. So let's look at our previous example here. So I just have the half reaction for what was oxidized. I'm leaving out the sulfur part. We'll talk more about that later. But in our previous example, the magnesium atoms turned into a magnesium ion by losing 2 electrons. So I know I've lost electrons because the electrons are on the right-hand side of the arrow here, which means it's a product. I'm giving off electrons. Remember, electrons are negative. So if I lose 2 negative charges, the overall charge of the ion is now become positive 2. And GER is going to stand for gain electrons reduction. So let's just show what's happening on the reduced atom side of the reaction. So the sulfur atoms gain 2 electrons. I know that's gain because it's on the left-hand side of the arrow, which means it's a reactant. Sulfur atoms reacted with these 2 electrons, or gained these 2 electrons to make a sulfide ion. Again, electrons are negative, so if I gain 2 negative charges, my overall charge becomes a 2 minus. So in summary here, in a redox reaction, electrons are transferred between reactants. One element is going to gain electrons, one element is going to lose electrons. If you remember the little phrase, Leo says grr, you remember the one that lost the electrons is the species or the element that was oxidized. The element that gained the electrons is the species that was reduced.